beat. I'll be asleep as soon as I hit the pillow. What are you reading?
Sex.
Guess I'm not that tired. I mean, just give me a second here.
Have you read this article on sex?
Well, which one?
About the new sex survey?
Are there pictures?
No. It's really quite fascinating. Did you know that the most sexually fulfilled people are married and monogamous?
Really?
Yes. And do you realize that there are married people, having sex 4 or more times a week?
Who?
They don't give names.
Well, do these people even work? I mean, gosh, we're lucky to do it once a month.
Oh, and I suppose that's my fault.
I didn't say that.
Oh, you implied it.
I did not.
You know it would help if you didn't waltz in here every night after 9:30.
It's not every night.
Besides, it's not just us. Lots of couples, almost 50%, only do it a few times a month.
No wonder men lose their hair. What else does this article say?
It says the second most appealing sex act is watching your partner undress.
You're kidding.
Relax, honey. After 7 years, I know what to expect.
Oh, yeah? Well, maybe I'll just do something a little different tonight.
Oh, you mean like take your right sock off before you
Yeah, maybe something like that.
It won't work. I've had a long day and you're late.
Oh, honey. I've been thinking about you all day.
I know, and 54% of men think about sex daily.
Well, have you been thinking about me?
No, only 19% of women do.
Well, then, what have you been thinking about?
If you had to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, take a shower, get the kids ready for school, pack their lunches, feed them breakfast, take them to work, take them to school, then come home, come home, pick the kids up, do the laundry, fix them dinner, pack them to bed at 8 o'clock, would you be thinking about sex?
Yeah. So, what do you say?
I say I'm tired and it's late.
Well, we don't have to take long.
The old 5 minutes between sports and the Letterman routine.
Well, you've never complained before.
I've never had time.
Come on.
The average couple takes 15 minutes to an hour, and if you take an hour or more...
An hour?
Or more.
Well, I guess I could miss ER tonight. Yeah, we could give it a try. I'm ready if you are.
About what? Oh, all right.
Mommy, I don't feel like I'm gonna throw up.
I'll be right there, Eric.
See you next month.
I have the honor of introducing our speaker for this evening. John Temple Bristow is speaking with us. He is the author of What Paul Really Said About Women and What Paul Really Said About Love, Marriage, and the Family, which is available in our CB bookstore, so feel free to stop by afterwards. He is a Christian Church Disciples of Christ pastor and is right now serving at Country Homes Christian Church in Spokane, Washington. He also has served as an adjunct professor at Northwest Christian College, Fuller Seminary, the Seattle Extension, George Fox University, and George Fox Evangelical Seminary. He has taught courses in marriage and family therapy, pastoral care and counseling, and women and men in ministry courses. He also has 2 doctorates. One, he has a doctorate of ministry from Lexington Theological Seminary in Kentucky, and he also has an honorary doctorate of letters from Northwest Christian College. He and his wife, Christy, have been married for 36 years. Please welcome John.
I was saddened by the announcement about John, and I noticed that cancer has been a theme here. I wasn't sure if I was going to mention it or not, but I would like to do so. I'm married to Christy, whom I regard as the most beautiful woman in the world. When I first met her, I looked at her. My socks began to roll up and down. That was 37 years ago. We've had 35 and a half years of maybe not the best marriage in the world, but the best marriage I could imagine. And she's been diagnosed with a virulent form of breast cancer. I give my thanks to a couple who came all the way over from Seattle to Spokane to be with her so I could be here this weekend. If all goes as is normal, when I get home, she will be bald, and she will still be the most beautiful woman in the world. But when you have a moment in your own private closet or where you go to pray, would you include Christy in your prayers? The theme, well, I should back up a moment. When I agreed to be here and speak on the subject tonight, I put in the little squares in this little calendar I open up on my desk a notation. But because the squares are so small, things have to be abbreviated a bit. So I wrote down an abbreviation for the topic tonight. I put sex, and then I put in comma in Portland. I forgot that sometimes my secretary needs to consult my calendar. When I saw this indescribable look on her face, I said, what's better than sleepless in Seattle? But the topic is sex and communication. I'm not sure that's a very good topic the way it's phrased, because sex is communication. Sex is communication. I took the title, the fuller title, from an account of a couple who were having difficulty in communicating. She had a simple message she kept telling him. She said, "Don't leave your pants on the floor. Pick them up." "Yes, dear. Yes, dear, I will." Later same week, same message. "Quit leaving your pants on the floor." "Yeah, I will. Finally, she got tired of saying it, so one day she nailed his pants to the floor. Was that communication? So is sex. We don't always communicate simply with words. Now, I cannot cover tonight very much of the subject. A lot could be said. In fact, a lot is also true for some, but not for everyone. I believe the only fact that's true about sex always and everywhere and for everyone is a simple fact that celibacy is not hereditary, and that's it. Everything else is variation. Some people talk about normal sex life. There isn't any such thing. Normal is simply a setting on your clothes dryer and nothing more. But I would like to share some thoughts and some insights that I find of value, and I'd like to share them with you in this way. I would like to invite you to go with me to a foreign country. I've had the privilege of being to a number of them, but this particular one is special. I like to walk around in it. I like to listen to the people speak. I like to ponder over the way they think and act that's so different from ourselves. And that foreign country I'd like to invite you to is history. For it is a foreign country. They do things differently there. And what I find in the subject of communication and sex is there were ideas in that country, in history, that we think are absurd. We don't believe them anymore. We wouldn't say them anymore. But we still have the same attitudes inherited from those ideas. We've dismissed the ideas, but the attitudes linger with us generation after generation. That's my thesis for tonight. And my conviction in it, in terms of communication regarding sex, is, first of all, that most miscommunication regarding sex happens long before we're old enough to think about getting married. And most of that miscommunication comes down many generations. That's where I'd like to begin. Now, I'd also like to mention I brought one of my favorite ties. Scene from Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel of God and Adam. And in God's arm is cradled the soul of Eve, who is quickly glancing to see what this future husband of hers looks like. But what I'd like to do is go back into history to Judaism and tell you about a story that they circulated about Eve, well, her predecessor, Adam's first wife. Some of you know her name? A few. Her name was Lilith. And it happened this way. Some of the rabbis were puzzling over the way what we call now first chapter of Genesis and second chapter of Genesis, how it reads. You remember that God creates male and female in God's image. That's first chapter. Later on, God creates Adam, well, first man, and a woman named Eve. So they said, well, who was this first woman? And they invented a story about her. And they gave her a name. It was Lilith. Now, Lilith, in this story, was kind of a problem when it came to sex. She wanted lots of it from Adam, but only on one condition, that she be on top. And Adam didn't like that, because it's man's supposed to be. You hear the symbolism? You hear communication there without words? And finally, according to the story, to make it sort of summarize, she finally left Adam, and she went over to the Euphrates River area and converted with demons. And the story goes on to say, now listen to the symbolism, think about the storytellers. The story goes on to say that when Adam and Eve sinned and they were condemned to be mortals and died, Lilith wasn't there. She was never condemned to death, to die. She's immortal. And she still lives today. And so the storytellers added that, or came from this story, that whenever a man had a rather erotic dream, it was said of him that he was visited by Lilith. Now, isn't that an interesting story? Isn't that a strange story? It's not biblical, certainly not historical. But I propose to you that the attitude, or the story itself, tells more about the storytellers than anything else. And that their attitude is still with us today. The attitude that sex is a means of conquest. It's a means of domination, or at least competition. I love the skit here. How many times? How often? Man must be dominant. I'm not talking about positions of sexual intercourse. I'm talking about attitudes. It spills over into married life. Who is dominant? Who gets to make decisions? Who's the leader? Who leads in the dance? Who leads in decision making? I've been told many times by those who don't appreciate my point of view on biblical things, well, in any organization, there has to be someone in charge. Ever heard that? They're referring to marriage. Need somebody in authority to make the decisions when there's a conflicting point of view. And my response is, that's why we call Christ Lord. But it's also true that sometimes you can't agree. And they say, but you have to have someone who makes the decision. Who's the final authority? It's that way in business. I said, you ever heard of a partnership? Marriage and the marriage bed are not places to make a winner and a loser. It's not what it's all about. One couple I know of, don't necessarily advise it, but one couple I know of, when they reach the point where they are not in agreement and will not be in agreement but have to make a decision, you know how they do it? Whatever. And they decide that's the way they're going to do it. And they live with it. They live with it. No winner or loser. Not that way. one pastor I know of was counseling with a couple, and the couple they fell into a habit. It was called only the neighbors hear both sides of the argument. They'd yell at each other. Now, there was no violence involved, but they would just yell at each other, and they couldn't hear because they're too busy yelling. And it was a pattern, repeated and repeated. So finally this pastor said, okay, I want you to try something different. He says, when you go home and when you're at home and you fall into this kind of pattern, I want you to agree that you will roll up some newspapers and take your clothes off and go at it. And it worked. They were so busy laughing, they forgot to yell. Does someone have to be in charge and the final authority? Does a marriage have to be of a winner and a loser? Does sex have to be a conquest and one who is the object of the conquest? Sex is communication. I'm simply asking the questions and recognizing that we have received some attitudes from ancient times, even though we've dismissed the ideas or the stories. Let's take a trip over to Greece, ancient Greece. They figured out how it is that babies are made and whether a baby will be a male or female. And in case you didn't know it, I'm going to tell you what they said. You see, according to them, a fetus will always be a male unless something goes wrong. It works this way, that a fetus will be a male unless something happens so it loses its vital heat, its vital spirit. Maybe, Aristotle said, it would happen because the mother, while she's pregnant, would be exposed to a moist south wind that's cool. But according to them, the difference between men and women is that men have vital heat inside, and women don't. And that's why women, they said, are cool and clammy. That's what they said. And they said that's why women menstruate. It's proof that their bodies are not able to burn up the surplus. They had this figured out. And a female, therefore, should have been a male if something didn't go wrong. So that's why Aristotle said that a female is a misbegotten male or a failed male. Now, it carried on into married life and adulthood. Because you see, in that culture, a man is supposed to have a vital heat. Ooh, ooh, ooh. But there's always a danger that a man may lose that vital spirit. It may become lessened. He may become womanish. And so the men strive to remain virile. And they watched each other with cold and hard and clear eyes to see if a man would begin to walk in a way that was feminine. They'd listen to the resonance of his voice. They'd listen to the resonance of his voice. His words, his attitudes. They kept an eye on each other. Now, we no longer believe all of that, do we? But the attitude can remain. It can remain and be taken into the marriage bed, where the man feels like he will be judged according to his performance. He may worry about how he looks. Perhaps his genitals are too small, or his way of showing authority is vulnerable and he might lose the respect of his wife. These are fears that haunt, that we seldom give words to, but are there. We've inherited them. Or the wife may feel that she is inadequate. Her bust is the wrong size, or her body is too fat or too thin, or 100 other concerns that women can come up with. But they're real. They're real. We must communicate. if we are to be healthy sexual beings before God, we must communicate that sexual intercourse is not a performance to be graded, but a relationship to be celebrated, for it is God's good gift for a married couple. Within Greek culture, and inherited within early Christianity, was a popular philosophy we know as Stoicism. The Stoics' idea about sex was that it was to be for procreation only. It's not to be enjoyed. They spoke of those who enjoyed sexual intercourse as like pigs rutting in the mud. Passion was not popular among Stoics. And most of the Christian fathers were raised as Stoics in that philosophy. That's why St. Augustine could regard marriage as a covenant with death. That would go into a marriage ceremony today, wouldn't it? Jerome, once taking the parable of the soils and applying the language to marital state, said, it's 30-fold to be married, 60-fold to be widowed, but 100-fold to be celibate. There was a popular piece of literature that circulated around. It's a story called Paul and Thecla, the story of the Apostle Paul, and how he went around with the good news of the gospel that says no sex. He would instruct couples that sex was bad. And indeed, he propagated something called the doctrine of syncretism, that only those who are virgins will get to heaven. And in some of those stories that circulate around, there were tales of Jesus appearing before a couple in the bridal chamber to dissuade them from consummating their marriage. We no longer believe those things, do we? It's all history. It's all gone. But some attitudes do remain. They do. There are some who have somehow grown up with the idea that sex is dirty. The idea it's still even fostered by some churches. So it was not long ago that a mother advised her daughter before the wedding night about sex, says, just close your eyes and make up your grocery list. Well, when my wife and I were married a few months, we had to get away from the intense pressure of school. So we drove off to Sisters, Oregon. I just love Central Oregon. We stopped in a motel, didn't know anything about it. Just had to, stay overnight somewhere, and that place had a place available. And I went in the motel, and apparently the owners were Methodist because they had a Methodist magazine there. This was back in 1966. And something caught my eye. The title of an article was, "Is Sex a Sacrament?" I just expected the Gideon Bible. I didn't know it came with it. But I read it. And it made an interesting claim. It was saying this is a gift from God. This is a gift from God. This is part of the creation when God said it is good. In fact, it's a part of creation where God said it's very good when he created humans, male and female. Made a good case. I just want to tell you it did. But I also want to say that part of the thinking behind it is that sex is God's plan. It was not something created by the devil when God's back was turned. The Campus Crusade for Christ piece of literature some years ago had something nice to say about it. It said, God could have found other ways for us to procreate. For example, we might mix earwax on Q-tips. But this is God's gift. This is God's gift. This is God's gift. This is God's gift. And a wonderful little discourse about the story of Ruth from a Methodist minister. Is it just Methodists that are sexy? I don't know. Anyway. His name is Bass Mitchell, and he lives in West Virginia. I'm going to read a section of it. It says there just seems to be so much out there that distorts this good attraction we have, that perverts it. Even the church at times has seen it as a hush-hush topic or even dirty. He goes on, says, I love the Living Bible's translation of Adam's words when he first sees Eve. This is it. And he asks, when's the last time you felt like that? The woman in the Song of Songs says of her man, he reports, listen, my lover, look, here he comes, leaping across the mountains, rebounding over the hills. My lover's like a gazelle or a young stag. Guys, when was the last time the thought of your beloved made you bound about like a deer? He adds, this love, this attraction is part of God's good creation. It is a way God has made us. Without it, we'd be trying to date trees or something. It is not bad or dirty, though it can be made to be. It is God's good gift to us, meant to enrich our lives, to be celebrated, enjoyed, and held as sacred. We believe as Christians that it deserves a relationship of a very great commitment, marriage. It's God's gift, but it can be so misused. In communication in marriage, we need to correct a lot of the miscommunication that has led to attitudes that linger. Especially true when someone has suffered in childhood or later some sexual abuse. That makes it so hard. To remember it is meant to be God's good gift. And to be celebrated. Be celebrated. We need communication now to counteract the miscommunications and the wrong attitudes. So I'd like to suggest some things that a couple might work on as far as communication. I might begin by asking, what is your marriage's mission statement? What's your mission statement? What's your marriage there for? And I'd like to lift up for your consideration the answer that Paul and Jesus both gave in all their teachings about the mission statement of a marriage. That the two shall become one flesh. One flesh. That's hard to figure out quite what that means. I'll tell you what it doesn't mean. If they're to become one, you're not supposed to have, when they become one, you're not supposed to have to ask, which one? This morning I mentioned about that time when Archie Bunker was talking to his daughter Gloria about his wife Edith. He says, I does all her thinking for her. I does all her thinking for her. Doesn't need to think. It is not a matter of which one. In a recent national survey in which 21,000 couples in 50 states were interviewed, they found that under the category top 10 stumbling blocks for married couples, number 1, problems sharing leadership equally. You don't have to ask which one. That's not what one flesh means. Becoming one flesh does not mean being one and the same. I wish we get this idea through to everybody. You can become one flesh without being one and the same. Conflicts happen because people are different. In fact, if they didn't happen, it'd be a shame. We have different gifts, different styles, different ideas, different depths of spirituality. We don't want to be the same. It'd be boring. Or as one woman said when she was interviewed on television about if she and her husband ever had a difference of opinion, she said, we concluded long ago that if we didn't have differences of opinion, one of us was unnecessary. She's right. She's right. Have you ever had in yourself an awareness of conflicting ideas? You said that you'd say, I'm of two minds. Anybody ever have that? Well, if you can have it as an individual, can't you have it as one flesh, a couple? It's normal. That's how we grow. Providing we listen to each other and communicate and work them out. Or any other way, Okay? One flesh. I'm not sure all it means, but I think it means this. That we become bonded. our lives become one. Two individuals, two spirits, but we're bonded. I've studied it. I've examined the phrase. I've looked at the meanings. I think it's the closest I can come to it. We're bonded. And if the other's gone, half of us is missing. And sex is a way of celebrating that. Not a substitute for it, it just celebrates it. As Rollo May talked of intimacy in marriage, I think he was talking about becoming one flesh, and what it meant sexually when he said that sexual stimuli can blossom into authentic intimacy and into love is one of the mysteries of life which can give us lasting solace and joy. May it be so for all of us. Please allow me to share a prayer and join me in its spirit. Lord, may you always be first in our lives. May you be the authority upon which our lives and our decisions are based. But as we share life with others, and if we have the opportunity to share our days and our nights with someone very special in marriage, may your love and your grace set a seal upon our hearts and a seal upon our lips. And may we learn of a bonding and love that is stronger than death. And may we learn what it means to become one flesh in the name of him who made us male and female, in the name of his Son, who blessed the wedding in Cana.